You checked your bank account last Thursday. The number was lower than it should have been. You did the mental math. Rent, utilities, the usual expenses. Nothing extraordinary. No surprise purchases, no unexpected bills. And yet somehow the balance didn't add up to what you expected. That vague sense that money is moving faster than it used to. That feeling of treading water despite doing everything the same way you've always done it. That quiet suspicion that something is happening, but nothing specific enough to point at. You're not imagining it. What started in late February 2026 has set off a chain reaction that most people won't fully understand until October, maybe November. By then, they'll have forgotten what caused it. They'll stand in the grocery store, stare at a receipt that seems impossibly high, and assume they must be bad at budgeting. They're not bad at budgeting. They just don't know what's coming. Right now, most people are staring at the gas station sign. $3.70, maybe $4, depending on where you live. They're filing it under annoying but manageable and moving on with their day. That filing is wrong, and the cost of getting it wrong isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's a grocery bill that keeps creeping up with no obvious explanation. A summer flight that somehow doubled. A mortgage rate that was supposed to come down and didn't. A credit card balance that never quite shrinks no matter how many payments you make. This video breaks down exactly what's happening, why you're not ready for it, and the specific moves that separate people who come through economic disruptions stronger from people who come through them weaker. Let's get into it. To understand why your bank account feels lighter, you need to understand the timeline most people are missing. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes across Iran. The geopolitical details will be debated by historians for decades. That's their problem. Your problem is what happened in the weeks since. Iran retaliated. Oil infrastructure took damage. By early March, the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile bottleneck that carries roughly 20% of the world's seaborne oil supply, was effectively closed. For the first time in history, commercial vessel traffic through the strait dropped to near zero. Normal traffic is 130 ships per day. The International Energy Agency called this the single largest energy supply disruption ever recorded. Larger than the 1973 OPEC embargo. Larger than the 1979 Iranian Revolution shock. They released 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, the largest release in the agency's history. That's not a routine adjustment. That's a fire extinguisher. Brent crude went from $71 per barrel to a peak near $120 in weeks. It's pulled back to around $100 on ceasefire signals. But if this drags beyond 6 weeks, analysts project $150 per barrel is on the table. The gas price you're staring at is wave 1. But this isn't one price spike. It's 5 separate shocks rolling toward your wallet on 5 different timelines. Each one bigger than the last. Each one disguised as something completely unrelated by the time it lands. The first wave is the one you can already see, gas. The national average has jumped from under $3 to nearly $4 per gallon. In California, drivers are paying over $5.50. Diesel, the fuel that powers the 18-wheelers that deliver literally everything you buy, has surged over 40% to nearly $5.40 per gallon. Here's why diesel matters more than the gas in your car. Diesel powers the refrigerated trucks, the farm equipment, the freight trains, the entire physical supply chain. Every cent diesel goes up translates directly into the cost of things it moves. This isn't theory. It's documented, predictable, and already happening. A $1 per gallon increase in gas prices removes roughly $150 billion in annual consumer spending from the economy. The average household is now looking at $750 in additional fuel costs this year. For most people, this registers as annoying. $40 or $50 more per month on the commute. They file it under temporary inconvenience and wait for things to normalize. The problem is, this wave isn't alone. And by the time people realize that, waves 2 through 5 will already be in motion. Which brings us to wave 2, groceries. This one lands in 30 to 60 days, and it's already started. You just can't see it yet. Diesel doesn't just move cars, it moves food. Refrigerated trucks deliver everything perishable on a schedule that doesn't allow for stockpiling. You cannot warehouse strawberries for 6 months while you wait for fuel costs to stabilize. When diesel rises by $1 per gallon, freight carriers pass 60 to 80% of that increase through within 30 to 60 days via fuel surcharges that update weekly. The transmission is fast, documented, and already in progress. Before this conflict, grocery prices were rising around 2.5% per year. Economists now project consumer price inflation climbing to 4.5% in coming months. Beef and veal were already projected up 5 to 9% in 2026. Coffee up 5%. Sugar nearly 7%. Now layer a 47% diesel spike on top of all of that. Retailers will absorb what they can, but they've been absorbing tariff costs for the past year. The cushion is gone. When it breaks, prices catch up fast. By May, you'll stand at the checkout with a total $50 or $60 higher than expected. You'll wonder if you somehow bought more food than usual. You didn't buy more food. The food just costs more. And nobody will announce this. There's no press conference scheduled for, "We regret to inform you that your grocery bill has permanently increased." It just quietly happens while you're busy living your life. But Wave 3 is the one that should genuinely concern you, because by the time you feel it, you'll have completely forgotten what caused it. This is the fertilizer wave, and it's set to land in October. Most people don't know this. Natural gas is the primary raw material for nitrogen fertilizer. Fossil fuels account for 70 to 90% of the cost of producing ammonia and urea, what farmers put in the ground to grow basically everything. And roughly a third of the world's seaborne fertilizer trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is closed. Within the first week of the conflict, major Gulf producers declared force majeure and halted exports. Granular urea jumped 50% in weeks. At import hubs across the Midwest, fertilizer retailers have stopped quoting prices, not because the market is stable, but because they can't guarantee delivery. Here's the timing issue that makes this wave so dangerous. Spring 2026 planting is happening right now. The decisions farmers are making this month determine the fall harvest. The fertilizer prices of March 2026 become the food prices of October 2026. You won't feel this wave in April. You'll feel it in October, standing in the produce aisle, convinced you must be doing something wrong financially. Nobody will connect it back to a Persian Gulf military operation that happened 7 months earlier. By then, February 28th will feel like ancient history. The cause and effect will be completely invisible. Wave 4 hits closer to home if you're planning any summer travel. Your vacation already costs more. You just haven't checked the prices yet. Jet fuel has surged more than 60% since the strait closure. Fuel accounts for 25 to 33% of airline operating costs, the single largest expense. When that jumps 60% in 3 weeks, airlines have two options: absorb it and destroy their balance sheet, or pass it through to customers. Airlines are not historically known for selfless absorption of costs. Analysts are projecting 15 to 30% fare increases for summer 2026 travel, with June and July absorbing the biggest hit. Some budget carriers have already increased prices over 100% on certain routes. Here's what makes airline pricing different from groceries. Airlines bake fuel costs into their models months in advance. Those higher fares don't come back down fast, even if oil drops tomorrow. The price you see today is almost certainly lower than next month. If you're planning summer travel and you haven't booked yet, the math is working against you every day you wait. And then there's Wave 5, the one that's going to quietly cost you the most money because it doesn't show up as a line item. It shows up as a number that won't go down. This is the interest rate wave, and almost nobody has connected it yet. At the start of 2026, markets were pricing in multiple Federal Reserve rate cuts this year. Lower mortgage rates, cheaper car loans, relief on those 22% credit card APRs. People were waiting for it, building financial plans around it. That expectation is now functionally dead. The Federal Reserve held rates at 350 to 375% at its March meeting. And here's the trap they're in. Higher oil prices push inflation up, while simultaneously dragging down consumer spending and employment. The Fed's two jobs, keep prices stable, keep people employed, are now pointing in opposite directions. Cut rates and you pour fuel on accelerating inflation. Raise rates and you risk tipping an economy already buckling under energy costs into a full recession. There's no clean exit. What does this mean for your actual life? 30-year mortgage rates are sitting between 6.25% and 6.5%, up from 5.87% in February. Auto loan rates for good credit buyers are running around 7%. Average credit card APRs are 21 to 24%. And Americans are carrying $1.27 trillion in credit card debt at those rates. If you were waiting for rates to come down before refinancing, before buying a house, before tackling that credit card balance, the math just changed underneath you. The relief isn't coming, at least not this year, and possibly not next. So those are the 5 waves: gas, groceries, fertilizer, airfare, interest rates. Each one arriving on a different timeline. Each one disguised as something unrelated by the time it lands. But here's what makes this situation genuinely dangerous. Your brain is actively working against you right now. When you encounter a complex, multi-layered problem, your mind doesn't process every layer simultaneously. It grabs the most visible data point and uses that as a stand-in for the entire situation. Psychologists call this anchoring bias. Right now, for most Americans, that anchor is the number on the gas station sign. $3.70, $4.20, whatever it is in your area. That number has become the mental proxy for the entire economic impact of this crisis. And because gas prices feel annoying but survivable, your internal threat assessment files the whole situation under temporary inconvenience. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency is calling this the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Not a moderate disruption, the greatest in history. This is precisely what happened in 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine. Gas prices spiked. People grumbled. Then the shock bled into groceries, rent, services, everything. Inflation hit 9%. By the time most people grasped the full scope, the damage to their purchasing power was already done. You're not irrational for missing this. You're running the same mental software as everyone else. But recognizing that software is the first step toward overriding it. To see what overriding it actually looks like and what happens when you don't, let me walk through what typically happens to households that wait. The gas price spike hits first. It's $40 or $50 more per month on transportation. Annoying, but they absorb it by spending slightly less elsewhere. Maybe fewer restaurant meals, maybe skipping one entertainment expense. Then the grocery wave lands. Another $40 or $50 per month that seems to appear from nowhere. The budget that was already tight gets tighter. The credit card starts carrying a small balance month to month, just temporarily. Then summer travel arrives with 15 to 30% higher airfare. The vacation they planned gets charged to the card because the cash isn't there. The balance grows. Then the mortgage refinancing or home purchase they were planning doesn't happen because rates went up instead of down. They stay in the apartment that's getting more expensive with each lease renewal. Then October arrives and food prices jump again from the fertilizer shortage nobody saw coming. The credit card balance that was supposed to be temporary is now a permanent fixture, accruing interest at 22% while the Fed refuses to cut rates. None of this feels like a disaster while it's happening. It feels like confusion, like bad luck, like somehow everyone else figured something out that you missed. But it wasn't luck. It was timing. The households that come through economic shocks in better shape aren't the ones with the highest incomes. They're the ones who adjusted earliest. Which raises the obvious question: what should you actually do before the remaining waves hit? The difference between people who emerge from economic disruption stronger and people who emerge weaker has almost nothing to do with what happened. It has everything to do with what they did while it was happening. Here's what actually works. Your emergency fund needs to exist, and it needs to earn something real. Nearly half of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. When your car needs $900 in brake work in the middle of a period where everything else is more expensive, the difference between having that cash and not having it is the difference between an inconvenience and a credit card charge compounding at 22% for the next 8 months. High-yield savings accounts are paying 4 to 5% APY right now, more than 10 times the national average of 0.39%. With the Fed frozen on rate cuts, these rates aren't going anywhere soon. 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, not total expenses, essential expenses, rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments. Calculate that number. Multiply by 4 to 6. That's your target. The psychological value of an emergency fund is almost more important than the financial value. When you know you have runway, you don't sell investments at the bottom. You don't put emergencies on credit cards. You don't make fear-based decisions that cost more than the emergency itself. If you're carrying high-interest credit card debt, attack it like the emergency it is. The rate cuts people were waiting for aren't coming. Every month you carry a balance at 22% through this period is a compounding tax on inaction. Paying off a card charging 22% is mathematically identical to earning a guaranteed 22% return tax-free. You cannot buy that return anywhere in any market. If you have multiple cards, use the avalanche method. Minimum payments on everything, then throw every extra dollar at the highest interest rate first. Do not panic sell your investments. Your portfolio is down on paper right now. The S&P 500 dropped nearly 7% from its January peak. The Russell 2000 crossed into correction territory. Every instinct is telling you to move to cash, to wait it out, to protect what's left. That instinct is the most expensive financial mistake you can make right now. Research tracking over 1 million investor accounts found that the average equity investor has underperformed the S&P 500 for 15 consecutive years. Not because of bad stock picks, but because of one behavior: selling during volatility and buying back in after recovery. 7 of the 10 best trading days over a 20-year period occurred during bear markets. 6 of those happened within 2 weeks of the worst days. The recovery doesn't happen gradually. It happens in violent upswings clustered right next to the crashes. Missing just the 10 best trading days in each decade since 1930 would have turned a nearly 15,000% total return into 91%. Not a typo, 91%. The volatility that feels terrifying right now is exactly where long-term wealth gets built by the people who stay in. Keep your investment contributions running. This feels counterintuitive. Your gut says stop throwing money into a falling market. But when you invest a fixed amount every month, you automatically buy more shares when prices are low and fewer when prices are high. Years from now, the shares you bought during this conflict will likely be some of the best investments you ever made. Set it, automate it, walk away from it. If you're planning summer travel, book flights now. Not this weekend, today. The 15 to 30% increases analysts are projecting haven't fully landed yet. Every day you wait costs money. Audit your energy exposure and adjust what you can. Long commute in a vehicle getting 15 miles per gallon? That math just changed materially. Small business moving physical goods? Renegotiate freight contracts now before the full diesel surcharge hits your next invoice. Cut discretionary spending before you have to. Gas is already here. Groceries are coming. Airfare is coming. The fertilizer shock is coming in fall. If you wait until all 5 waves have landed to adjust your budget, you'll be scrambling reactively instead of moving proactively. The households that fare best during economic disruptions make small, unglamorous adjustments early, trimming spending, fortifying savings, maintaining investment contributions, reducing high-interest debt. None of those moves are dramatic. None of them make for exciting stories. But that's exactly the kind of invisible adjustment that creates real financial distance between people who were prepared and people who weren't. Now, I want to be honest about what could go wrong, because there's a scenario that keeps serious economists genuinely worried: stagflation. Rising inflation and slowing economic growth happening at the same time. It's the worst-case scenario for your money because the tools that fix inflation, raising interest rates, also crush growth. And the tools that stimulate growth, lowering rates, make inflation worse. There's no clean exit. If the conflict drags on and the Strait of Hormuz stays disrupted, some analysts project Brent crude could approach $130 to $150 per barrel. At that level, we're past inconvenience. We're into structural damage to household budgets, consumer spending, and corporate earnings. The 1973 OPEC oil embargo is the comparison analysts keep reaching for. Every major oil price shock in the last half-century has been followed by some form of recession. 1973 led to a 2-year economic contraction. 1979 doubled oil prices and triggered another recession. The 2008 oil spike preceded the financial crisis. That doesn't mean it will happen. It means the probability is elevated, and anyone telling you they know exactly how this plays out is lying. What we do know is that even in the best-case scenario, where the strait reopens and oil flows resume, relief won't be instant. Economists describe the rockets and feathers effect. Prices shoot up like a rocket when costs rise, but drift down like a feather when they fall. After Russia invaded Ukraine, gas spiked within days. It took months to come back down. Even in the optimistic scenario, you're looking at weeks of ramp-up for production facilities, months for prices to drift back to normal, and a long tail of elevated costs rippling through the supply chain. All of which brings me back to the real gap. Not between rich and poor, not between lucky and unlucky, but between people who prepare early and people who don't. Research on past economic shocks, the 1973 oil crisis, the 2008 financial collapse, the 2020 pandemic, the 2022 inflation surge, reveals a consistent pattern. The households that fared best weren't the ones with the highest incomes. They were the ones who adjusted earliest, who recognized the signals before the full impact arrived, who made small, unglamorous moves while everyone else was still deciding whether this was real. Compounded over the 6 to 12 months that an economic disruption typically takes to fully cycle through the system, those early adjustments create an enormous gap. Not because the individual moves are large, because they started before the pressure arrived. You're watching this video right now. You're thinking about your money, your budget, your investments, your exposure. Most people won't think about any of this until the 4th or 5th wave has already hit their bank account. By then, the window for proactive adjustment is closed. Your window is open right now. And that brings me to the thread that ties everything in this video together. Every wave in this crisis, gas, groceries, fertilizer, airfare, interest rates, reveals the same underlying truth. Most people aren't prepared for economic disruption because nobody taught them how the economy actually works, how supply chains transmit costs, how inflation compounds, how interest rates affect every financial decision they make, how their own psychology works against them during periods of uncertainty. Financial literacy isn't just about budgeting or saving or investing. It's about understanding the system you're operating in well enough to see what's coming before it arrives. The people who adjusted early to this crisis didn't do so because they had insider information or special access. They did it because they understood the mechanics. How diesel prices become grocery prices, how fertilizer shortages become food inflation, how Fed decisions become mortgage rates. That understanding is learnable. It's not reserved for economists or financial professionals. It's basic knowledge that everyone needs and almost no one receives. I made a complete breakdown of financial literacy that covers exactly this: how debt compounds, how inflation erodes purchasing power, how the financial system actually functions, how to build systems that protect you during periods exactly like this one. If anything in this video made you realize you're operating without a complete picture of how money works, that's your next step. Because here's the truth. The 5 waves I described are going to hit everyone. The difference between people who come through stronger and people who come through weaker isn't whether they felt the impact. It's whether they understood what was happening and responded accordingly. Most people will spend the rest of 2026 confused about why everything keeps getting more expensive. You just spent 20 minutes understanding exactly why. The only question is whether that understanding turns into action. The moves aren't complicated. Emergency fund in a high-yield account. Credit card debt attacked aggressively. Investment contributions maintained through volatility. Summer travel booked before fare increases fully land. Discretionary spending trimmed before the remaining waves hit. None of that is dramatic. None of it makes for exciting stories. But that's exactly the kind of boring, unglamorous preparation that creates the gap between people who were ready and people who weren't. You're not irrational for feeling anxious about what's happening. That anxiety is the correct signal. It means you're paying attention. The mistake isn't feeling the fear. The mistake is letting the fear choose for you. Panic selling, freezing, pretending it'll blow over. Those are the responses your nervous system was built for, and they are exactly wrong for this moment. The right response is quieter. Prepare, adjust, continue. And then give yourself permission to stop doom scrolling the financial news. The headlines are designed to amplify fear, not inform action. You've already taken the action. You don't need the fear. You've navigated uncertainty before. You'll navigate this one too. The only question is whether you'll let the disruption make your decisions for you or whether you'll make them yourself.